The Trump 2024 campaign headquarters stood tall under the bright Florida sun, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the massive LED screen flashing Trump 2024 Save America. American flags and mega banners flapped in the warm ocean breeze while a small but vocal group of supporters gathered outside, holding up signs that read "No more Bidenflation" and "Secure the border." Inside, it did not feel like a typical campaign office. This was not some dull government building filled with gray suits and policy memos. No, this was a war room, a place where information was a weapon and every word spoken could shift public opinion in an instant. A massive chart covered one of the walls, titled "The Impact of Tariffs on the American Economy," with arrows pointing to job growth, manufacturing resurgence, and a bold warning about fentanyl pouring in from Mexico. TV screens lined the walls, flashing between Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. One monitor looped a clip of Chuck Schumer whining about beer prices, with a bold red caption underneath, "A Democrats worry about beer but not the border." In the corner, a detailed immigration map of the U.S. was pinned up, covered in red marks indicating hot zones where illegal immigration and drug smuggling were hitting hardest. Campaign aides circled key stats and talking points Karoline Leavitt would be hammering home in the next media round. At the center of the room, Karoline stood behind the livestream podium, the glow of the camera lights reflecting off her sharp, confident stance. In front of her, a massive screen displayed the top trending topics on Twitter or X: a Trump tax hike, a coordinated media push from the left. Karoline was right, a rising counterwave from conservative voters. A staffer leaned in, whispering, "Fox News just brought up Trump's tariffs. They're saying it will spike beer prices." Karoline smirked, arms crossed. So today we are talking about beer and guacamole while fentanyl floods across the border. This was not just another press briefing, this was a battlefield. Karoline Leavitt glanced at the monitor where Fox News was still replaying the same talking point: tariffs, beer, guacamole. It was almost comical how a national crisis had been boiled down to a grocery list. She turned back to the camera, her expression caught between amusement and disbelief. "All right, so first it was beer. Then guacamole. What's next?" She raised a brow, pausing just long enough to let the anticipation build. "Avocados, also from Mexico." A small smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. "And if you're having pizza tonight, well, brace yourself, the price of cheese might go up too." Her tone was dry, almost teasing, but then it shifted, sharp, deliberate. "And while Chuck Schumer is out here losing sleep over his beer, Trump is focused on saving American lives." Her eyes locked onto the camera. "So let me ask you something, Senator Schumer, what price would you pay? What would it take for you to finally care?" The room went silent. Campaign staffers barely moved as they listened. What if it was your child? What if your child was killed by an illegal immigrant who never should have been here in the first place? Or what if they died from Chinese fentanyl trafficked right across our borders, both southern and northern? The only sound in the room was the hum of the monitors. Karoline let the weight of her words settle before taking a small step back, crossing her arms. "Tell me, Senator, what's the going rate for human life these days?" She knew the clip would be everywhere within the hour, and that was exactly the point. The camera went live, and Karoline Leavitt's voice came through, crisp and confident. "What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel." She leaned slightly forward, flashing a knowing smile. "Hope you all doing great, wherever you tuning in from." Behind her, the campaign war room buzzed with energy, staffers tracking real-time headlines, social media trends lighting up the monitors. But right now, all eyes were on Karoline. "Let's talk about what's happening. The Trump campaign is absolutely on fire." She gestured slightly, emphasizing each word. "Day after day, we are setting the record straight. And let's be honest," she let out a small laugh, shaking her head, "we have never seen anything like this before." She reached for the tablet in front of her, tapping the screen. "Now, in this next clip, I want you to watch closely. This is where it gets good." The screen behind her switched to a paused frame from a Fox News segment. White House press secretary, former White House press secretary, now part of the Trump 2024 campaign, Karoline Leavitt absolutely dismantles a Fox News reporter who thought she could trap her. She raised a brow, letting the suspense build. Big mistake. The screen faded to black, and the clip rolled. The battle of words was about to begin. The energy in the war room was electric. Staffers were glued to their screens, watching as Karoline Leavitt took complete control of the Fox News interview. A live feed played in the background, and Karoline, calm, sharp, and completely unfazed, was in the middle of shutting down another reporter who thought she could catch her off guard. The camera zoomed in as she delivered the final blow. The reporter sat there, stunned, eyes darting down to her notes, searching for a comeback that wasn't there. Karoline leaned back slightly, satisfied. "Yeah, that's what I thought." She turned back to the audience. "Letton, roll the clip." The screen behind her transitioned to the Fox News segment. "Martha, let's talk facts." Her voice was steady, controlled. This was not a debate she was going to lose. Joe Biden allowed an unprecedented surge of illegal deadly drugs and illegal immigrants into this country. And let's be clear, that has cost American lives. She paused for effect, letting the weight of her words settle. Now, within 2 weeks, Trump has already made serious progress. This morning, the Mexican president caved. He agreed to send 10,000 troops to the southern border to protect our homeland. And what did it take? A 1-month delay on tariffs. That's it. She raised a brow. You know what that is? That's leadership. A few staffers exchanged knowing glances. The numbers were already rolling in. This clip was about to explode online. And we will see what comes out of the call between Trump and the Canadian Prime Minister. But let's be honest here, Trump is sending a message loud and clear to the rest of the world, including our North American allies in Canada and Mexico. She straightened, her tone firm. The United States is no longer a dumping ground for illegal deadly drugs and illegal immigrants. That ends now. The camera cut back to Karoline at the campaign headquarters. She exhaled slightly, then smirked. And that, my friends, is how you handle the media. She leaned forward, locking eyes with the audience through the lens. Now. Tell me again, who's really in control here? The room was silent for a moment before the campaign team erupted into applause. Karoline simply smiled. This was just another day at the office. The clip faded out, and the camera cut back to Karoline Leavitt standing at the podium with an amused expression. She leaned slightly against the podium, shaking her head. That was a very interesting show and tell, wasn't it? She let the rhetorical question hang in the air for a moment before straightening up, her expression sharpening. And you know what that clip proves? That the Democrat Party is still completely out of touch with the American people. She gestured slightly toward the screens behind her, where headlines were still flashing. Because while Chuck Schumer is out here whining about the cost of a pint of beer, Trump is talking about saving American lives. Her voice dropped slightly, becoming more direct. So let me ask Chuck Schumer this, what would you give? What price would you pay? She stepped forward, locking eyes with the camera. If your child was killed by an illegal immigrant, someone who never should have set foot in this country in the first place? A brief pause. The room was dead silent. Or if your child died because of illegal Chinese fentanyl trafficked right across both our southern and northern borders? She let the words sink in, then exhaled lightly, shaking her head. Think about that, Senator. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm, steady. Because the truth spoke for itself. She took a step back, glancing at the screen behind her once more. And meanwhile, the media wants to talk about beer. The camera lingered for a moment before fading to black. The screen faded back to Karoline Leavitt standing at the podium, her expression resolute. The room behind her was still buzzing, staffers tracking reactions online, keeping a close watch on how the message was landing. But right now, all focus was on her. She let the moment breathe, then spoke. "You know, there are thousands of parents across this country who have already lived through that nightmare." Her voice was steady, measured. No dramatics. Just the weight of cold, hard truth. Thousands of families who have felt that loss firsthand. She exhaled slightly, shaking her head. And there is no price, no amount of money, no policy rollback, no political maneuvering, that can bring their child back. The room was silent. This wasn't about politics. This was about reality. She lifted her chin slightly. And that's exactly what Trump is doing with these tariffs. She gestured toward the screen behind her, where news headlines flashed updates on the latest trade negotiations. He is making it crystal clear that the American people come first. That this country will no longer be exploited, taken advantage of, or treated as a dumping ground for illegal drugs and crime. Her tone sharpened. And Democrats have a choice. She let that sink in before continuing. They can either get on board with that, or they can continue to lose elections, just like they did on November 5th. There was a quiet hum among the staffers, the subtle acknowledgement of the truth in her words. Karoline took a small step back, arms crossed. Because let's be honest, the American people have already made their decision. And with that, she let the camera linger for a moment before the screen cut to black. The studio lights reflected off the sleek podium as Karoline Leavitt stepped back into the frame, her sharp gaze locked onto the camera. The campaign headquarters buzzed with energy, but in this moment, all attention was on her. Karoline let out a slight shake of her head as if she couldn't believe how predictable the left had become. Once again, she shut it down. Her hand lightly rested on the podium as she glanced at the monitor behind her, where the latest headlines were still rolling in. The Democrats haven't changed. They're still more focused on petty complaints than the real crises hurting American families. She leaned forward slightly, her tone precise and deliberate. While they are whining about the price of a beer, Trump is taking action. He's securing the border, stopping the flood of illegal drugs, and putting American safety first. The room was dead quiet. This wasn't just rhetoric. This was reality. Meanwhile, the left continues to pretend that the biggest problem this country faces is the cost of a drink while their open border policies are costing American lives every single day. Karoline tilted her head slightly, her eyes steady. This is why they keep losing. Off-screen, a few campaign staffers exchanged looks, nodding in silent agreement. The American people don't want empty slogans. They want action. Her voice carried weight, each word landing with purpose. And that is why Trump is the only one willing to fight for them. She exhaled, a knowing smirk crossing her face. Karoline was just saying what everyone else was already thinking, and she was absolutely right. She folded her arms, raising a brow with just a hint of amusement. Democrats have two choices, wake up or keep losing. So let's talk about the real issues beyond beer and avocados, shall we? She leaned slightly forward, emphasizing each word with precision. Because at the end of the day, nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the pain and suffering the American people have endured due to the illegal immigration and drug crisis, especially over the past 4 years. She let the weight of that statement settle before shifting gears. But when it comes to lowering inflation, the Trump 2024 campaign is fully committed to driving down costs. And if Donald Trump returns to the White House, he will immediately utilize tariffs effectively to protect the American economy. She motioned toward the screen behind her, where policy proposals from the campaign were displayed. We've seen this before. Trump launched a massive deregulation agenda during his first term, slashing 10 regulations for every new one added. If he wins in November, that's exactly what's coming back. Her expression was firm as she locked eyes with the camera. And that's just the beginning. She took a step forward, driving home her next point. The Trump campaign is also focused on revitalizing American energy production. And mark my words, the Trump energy boom will be back. A few staffers exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. We know that increasing domestic energy production will drive down the cost of living across this country. That's why Trump is committed to bringing that back if he is elected again. Her hand rested on the podium, her voice steady and powerful. So we are not just running to win. We are running to put America back on the right track. She shook her head slightly. And let's look at the numbers. When Trump left office, inflation was at 1.4%. She paused, letting that fact speak for itself. The only reason this country was thrown into an inflation crisis was because of Joe Biden's reckless spending. A brief sigh, as if the truth couldn't be any clearer. And under a second Trump administration, that will not happen again. Behind her, the screen displayed a side-by-side comparison of economic figures from the Trump and Biden presidencies. Look no further than the money American taxpayers will save when Trump is back in the White House. Her voice softened just slightly, transitioning into a more conversational tone. And Martha, I'll add this, Donald Trump wants American businesses to thrive. To do what they do best. But to do it right here in the United States of America. She smirked slightly, eyes sharp with certainty. He has promised the lowest energy costs and the lowest taxes anywhere in the world. She let the words sink in, then leaned in for the final statement. So to any company out there looking to do business in the greatest country on earth, I have one simple message: if Donald Trump returns to the White House, America will be open for business like never before. Karoline didn't hesitate. She leaned in slightly, locking eyes with the camera, her tone carrying the weight of conviction. Karoline was absolutely right. She exhaled lightly, shaking her head. And honestly? This needs to be said even louder. The atmosphere in the room was charged. Staffers weren't just watching, they were feeling the momentum build. For the past 4 years, American families have been struggling. Parents losing children to fentanyl flooding across our borders. Workers being crushed under skyrocketing costs. Small businesses suffocating under Biden's reckless policies. She let that statement land before driving home the point. People are hurting. And they need relief. A quick glance at the screen behind her showed a flash of headlines: economic downturn, border crisis, inflation spikes. And that's exactly what Trump is delivering. She tapped the desk. Lightly emphasizing every word: a deregulation, energy independence, tariffs that put America first. She let a beat pass, allowing the weight of her words to settle. Real solutions, the kind that rebuild this country and restore hope. She paused, then nodded slightly, as if acknowledging what everyone was already thinking. Karoline laid it out perfectly. A reporter from Fox News, seated in the front row, took the opportunity to press further. But can you really say America is open for business when many economic experts argue that tariffs could drive up consumer prices? Karoline turned toward the reporter without missing a beat. You know what drives up prices? Out-of-control spending. The kind of reckless policies that pushed inflation to record highs. The kind of economic mismanagement that forces working-class Americans to choose between rent and groceries. She let the words sink in before delivering the counterpunch. Under this administration, the economy will boom. Law-abiding Americans will finally come first again. Another reporter jumped in. Is that why figures like Elon Musk are paying close attention to Trump's policies? A small smile crept onto her lips. That's exactly why. The room stilled as she continued. Because if you take a hard look at the waste and abuse running through U.S. aid over the past several years, you'll see exactly why business leaders are stepping back and reevaluating priorities. She reached for the stack of notes beside her, flipping through them with precision. Let me give you some examples. She lifted a sheet and read aloud. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces. A murmur rippled through the press pool. $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland. A scoff from someone in the back. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. A pause. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. She set the papers down and folded her hands together, her expression unwavering. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars funding this crap. And I know the American people don't either. The tension in the press briefing room was thick, but Karoline Leavitt remained unfazed. If anything, she looked even more in control. A Fox News reporter leaned in, voice sharp. Karoline, critics say these budget cuts could be extreme. Do you really think slashing these programs is what's best for America? Karoline didn't flinch. She straightened slightly, meeting the reporter's gaze head-on. You tell me what's extreme. Cutting taxpayer-funded transgender operas in Colombia? Or the fact that American families can barely afford groceries? A murmur rippled through the room. What's extreme, she continued, voice steady, eliminating a $1.5 million DI initiative in Serbian workplaces? Or letting our seniors struggle to afford medication while our government sets money on fire overseas? She gestured to a folder on the podium, flipping open a highlighted document. This isn't speculation. This is where your money has been going. A different reporter from CNN interjected, skeptical. But Karoline, these are relatively small budget items compared to defense or infrastructure spending. Is this really the battle Trump wants to fight? She let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. Relatively small? She picked up another sheet. $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. It all adds up. And do you know what that total is? She didn't wait for an answer. Billions. Billions of dollars wasted on ideological pet projects while everyday Americans suffer. The press pool was silent. She set the papers down deliberately. And that is exactly why President Trump has given Elon Musk a mission: get the fraud, waste, and abuse out of our federal government. Cut the nonsense. Stop the corruption. Redirect those funds back to the American people. Another hand shot up. So you saying Elon Musk is officially part of Trump's policy team? Karoline's lips curled into a knowing smile. I'm saying that people who know how to innovate, who know how to disrupt a broken system, are exactly the kind of people Trump values. A few reporters quickly jotted down notes. And let's be honest, this is why Americans are struggling. Not because they aren't working hard, but because their hard-earned money is disappearing into nonsense like this. She leaned in slightly, voice firm. Karoline just laid it all out. And I'll say it again, this is why the America First agenda matters. She paused, scanning the room. No more wasting billions on radical ideology abroad while Americans suffer at home. That's the promise. That's the mission. The tension in the press room thickened as the large screen behind Karoline Leavitt flickered to life. A political commentator appeared, voice laced with urgency. It's a really, really sad day in America. We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We warned that Trump wanted to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is how dictatorships begin. When you get the Constitution and install yourself as the sole authority, that is how dictators are made. The clip ended. The screen faded to black. A few reporters exchanged knowing glances, while others turned their attention back to Karoline, waiting for her response. She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, her expression composed but carrying an unmistakable air of amusement. A constitutional crisis, she repeated, dragging out the words as if considering them carefully. So that's the story we're running with today? She leaned forward, placing a hand casually on the podium, her voice unwavering. I hope everyone here enjoyed that clip because, honestly, it was nothing more than political theater. A few chuckles came from the back of the room, but most eyes remained locked on her, anticipating her next move. You know what a real crisis looks like. She paused, scanning the room. A real crisis is when American families can't afford to put food on the table. When parents lose their children to fentanyl pouring across our borders. When the justice system is weaponized against political opponents while actual criminals roam free. The room fell quiet. A CNN reporter raised a hand. But Karoline, doesn't Trump's statement about being a dictator on day one raise serious concerns? She let out a quiet chuckle, shaking her head as if the question itself was absurd. You know what's funny? They dream about Trump being a dictator. But remind me, who is it that locked down the country, shut down businesses, mandated vaccines, censored speech, and even sent the FBI after parents at school board meetings? Silence. Because last I checked, that wasn't Donald Trump. A Fox News correspondent jumped in. So just to clarify, are you saying Trump won't use executive orders aggressively on day one? Karoline didn't hesitate. What I'm saying is that Trump will do what is always promised, put America first. She lifted a finger, driving home her point. If enforcing our border laws is considered dictatorship, then maybe the current administration should have done a better job. A second finger. If unleashing American energy production and cutting radical regulations is considered dictatorship, then maybe we need to rethink that word. A third. If prioritizing hardworking Americans over special interests is what they call dictatorship, then I think millions of voters are just fine with it. A reporter quickly followed up. Then how does Trump respond to accusations that he's undermining democracy? Karoline smirked, slightly tilting her head. Oh, I love this one. She let the tension linger for a moment before continuing. Because apparently, democracy now means raiding your political opponent's home. Democracy means indicting your leading challenger on flimsy charges during an election year. Democracy means silencing dissent and forcing Americans to comply with unconstitutional mandates. She paused, scanning the room. Tell me, where exactly does that sound like a free country? Silence. She raised a brow, arms crossed. I'll wait. The Florida sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the campaign headquarters. The palm trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, their silhouettes stretching across the pavement outside. The distant hum of waves rolling onto the shore blended with the occasional cry of a seagull, creating a stark contrast to the fiery debate unfolding inside. Back in the press room, the screen had just gone dark, leaving behind a brief moment of silence before a murmur rippled through the crowd. A few reporters exchanged amused glances. Some shook their heads in disbelief. The clip they had just watched was yet another attempt to frame Trump and Elon Musk as power-hungry tyrants. Karoline Leavitt, however, seemed more entertained than anything else. She let out a quiet chuckle, tapping her nails lightly against the podium as she took a moment to compose her response. So let me get this straight, she began, her voice laced with amusement. The argument here is that holding people accountable and cutting waste is somehow a threat to democracy? She shook her head, a smirk forming. This is pure comedy. A few chuckles echoed through the room. Let's be honest, what's actually happening here is that the establishment is panicking. They've had free rein over taxpayer dollars for years, and now that someone is stepping in to put an end to the waste, they're acting like it's the end of the world. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice just enough to command full attention. The executive branch stepping up and demanding accountability isn't dictatorship. It's leadership. The murmurs among the press grew louder. Some reporters were already typing furiously, while others seemed caught between skepticism and reluctant agreement. She straightened, adjusting the mic slightly. The funniest part, she continued, letting a playful pause stretch out. The louder they scream, the more it proves just how out of touch they are with what the American people actually want. A few cameras clicked, capturing the moment. She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the room one last time before flashing a knowing smile. Anyway, she teased, her tone light and almost conspiratorial, if you enjoyed the clip, smash that thumbs up. button, subscribe to Common Sense, and I'll see you in the next one. The room broke into a mix of laughter, whispers, and hurried note-taking. Outside, the warm Florida air carried the scent of salt and fresh-cut grass. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, setting the sky ablaze in hues of orange and violet. The evening was settling in, but inside campaign headquarters, the momentum was only just beginning.